Your nervous system picks a survival strategy. And if you have a client who you've served a medicine to who's now in a medical or even psychospiritual emergency, what might that be like for you? If you can't go into a supportive role, you got to call somebody who will.
Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs in Recovery. I'm your host, Jesse Harless. This is a podcast where we explore healing stories of resilience, entrepreneurship, and also the healing potential of psychedelic medicines. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I'm really excited today. I'm excited about today's episode you're about to hear. Before I get into that, if you would take a moment to subscribe on YouTube so you can follow the show, follow the videos that come out. Also, if you could take a minute of your time to like and subscribe and leave a review, or actually just leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, I'd be most appreciative. It helps this algorithm to find more people, bring more people to the show. So today I'm really excited because I had Jo Snyder, and Jo is just an amazing human. This is one of the most vulnerable podcasts I've ever done. And you're going to hear why, because Jo has been part of my experiences with psychedelic medicines. She's been in many of those containers. So this is a very personal, special episode. You're going to hear about Jo's story. You're going to hear about her training called the Prepared Guide, which is such an important training in this space of psychedelics and what's happening there, and keeping people safe that have medical emergencies or spiritual emergencies. You're just going to hear so many details about her journey, her life story, why she created this training, my story, why I think it's relevant for the space. So really excited for you to all meet Jo. Hope you'll have a great day. Hey, Jo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jesse. Super, super good to be here with you. Yeah, we've occupied a few different containers, and this is a completely new one.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And I'm really excited to tell the audience more about some of these other containers as we get into the episode. But yeah, I'm just really grateful you're here. It's, I think the time is right, and to have you on the show and really explore all the things that you're up to, which is really important. One of the big reasons I brought you on as well is about your training and what you're doing in the world. And so maybe we can start with a little bit about Jo and letting the audience know a little bit about your story, and hear how did you, I know this with everyone, it is such a unpacking process, unfolding of the layers of life to get you here. But maybe at a high level, how did you become Jo and get to this training? Maybe a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. This particular path to, especially this training, has been, there have been many roads they've been winding, and a lot of different skills, tool sets to gather and turn into this bundle that is the training. But it started as being in Western medicine. I'm a respiratory therapist. I am not a practicing one anymore. I left the bedside in 2019, which happened to be just a really great time to step away from the hospital setting before the pandemic really hit. I had been in that space for 10 years. Mostly working in pediatric ICU and neonatal ICU, but also all over the hospital as well, mostly all in intense care, units and ER. But yeah, I just got super burnt out by our system. Unfortunately, medical, when I was a new grad, was about caring for people. And it still is. The people at the bedside are absolutely doing that. But, the powers that be, the money-making machine that it's become, really, really limits that, and really doesn't take care of the healthcare providers at the bedside either, as well as the patients in the beds. So I had the opportunity to step away and to reevaluate what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I'm really grateful for that. because that shift needed to happen, and it looked a lot different than I could have imagined. Um, how I came into the psychedelic space was first from just the impact it had on my life. I started exploring with psychedelics when I was 17. Like most folks, you know, THC into psilocybin into others. But I can still remember the impact of that first deep psilocybin, journey. And, during that time, there was no recommendations for dosing. You would just buy, like an eighth, and you take it all and see what happened. And so I had a lot of also very interesting experiences along the way. But I knew how important it was for me. And so I continued to explore more psychonautically, and also just kind of explorationally, and a little bit more in a kind of, just, more in a party scene kind of a way, for 10 plus years or so. And then in 2018, I met my mentors, who I still consider my mentors, will forever consider them both mine, and who I now work with within their practice and within mine. And they held me in a therapeutic container in 2018. And that just really blew me away, as far as kind of shifting that relationship with psychedelics from just kind of explorational and casual to, like, we're really doing some work here, and getting to experience how profound that was, and um, how much good work could be done in a lot shorter of a time with good facilitation. From there, I did some harm reduction, and it was actually at Gem and Jam Festival in Tucson, Arizona. We had some pretty huge presentations during that weekend, and it was in that container that I just realized I feel deeply of service to the medicines to help people not have this experience. That was more challenging. Not to say there's not benefit to that, but safer, more supportive overall experiences. So from there, I didn't want to get back into medical, but I had all this training. I thought, well, I'll be a medical assistant. I applied for a medical assistant job for a surgeon, and it turned out that the surgeon happened to have a ketamine clinic in Sedona, Arizona. That's what the job was for, which was totally kismet and just amazing, because that's where I was starting to focus in. And then here's this beautiful opportunity. Got the job. And I think about 3 months later, I was the clinical manager of said clinic. And I did that for 2 years. And I got a really great Western, uh, psychological psychedelic training. So I also trained holistically with my mentors for some years. And like I said, still consider them mentors, still learning alongside and next to and from one another all the time. And I also worked with a somatic experiencing practitioner in Sedona for 2 years, which is what put me on my SEP pathway, because to me, that was the missing link to the skill set in the psychedelic space, as like understanding someone's nervous system and what they're capable of and what's safe for them at this time, and how to not push through resistance in a way that's going to cause more damage than good. So those are kind of all the pieces, pathways, parts. And then, over time, I've created my own practice and am here in Crestone doing all of that.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really great, just succinct description, but I know how deep each of those stories run from getting to know you a little bit over the couple of years that we've known each other. And, I want to get into what you mentioned about presentations and how people present in psychedelic experiences. I want to talk about that. But before I do, I'd like to also just be, vulnerable too, to be about my journey and the journey that went from abstinence sobriety all in. That's the way it is, to COVID and my awakenings with this pathway to psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy, and in a very intentional way. That's how I wanted to do it. And I ended up meeting you in probably a year into the journey of this really big rebirth, dark night of the soul type experiences I was having, just because my ego, my identity, my whole world was changing because I was engaging in drugs, and instead of them understanding that these are also medicines and very strong and powerful tools and catalysts of incredible healing for PTSD, incredible awakenings for your spiritual life, and just to name a few, never mind intimate relationships and the relationship with yourself. So speaking of that, I had a really beautiful experience with your mentor, who mentor and then mentors, but mentor, which I consider as well these folks mentors as well. And so to just be really vulnerable. I mean, my very first experience of a powerful heart opening medicine, you were in the container for this therapeutic 8-hour container of time that really blew me open like I've never been open in my life. And I can't even describe the love that I felt. Never have I felt that in my life. And it's hard to encapsulate all that happened in that time, but I'll just say that was a real big opening for me to say, wow, what else is here in this space? What else is here for me? What else is here for others? And I'm just like, let's go. And then the next day, I actually sat in another container of another medicine experience that I had never tried. And I got to watch the presentations of men, because there was just 3 men doing this one at a time. And I got to watch some of the biggest presentations I've ever seen still, even though I'm very familiar with this medicine now, and I've seen many presentations. And I just was in the awe, the journaling, the integration of this. I stopped everything, all medicines, for like 4 to 6 months after that, because I was just integrating all of it. And so you were in that container. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Oh man, that container, that was, I mean, well, one, it's so funny when we talked about doing the podcast, I had in some ways, kind of forgotten that that was, your first coming to a therapeutic space with these medicines, after a long time of sobriety. And, I was letting myself wander back to that, that room, that place, that experience. And, yeah, it was just so beautiful, because at that point in time, I was still very much, mentee role, and so your trust, to have me in your space, in support of that journey alongside of the main facilitator, was just, well, deeply meaningful. And the work that you did, powerful, and such a learning experience. But to your point about the group container, that was also, I think to this day, some of the biggest presentation, that I've witnessed as well. And I've seen a lot too. And the funniest thing about that container, as you remember, by oversight, really, and maybe not, I don't know, maybe a little bit of silliness, I was the only female in the container, with all of the men. And that was also my first time holding that container as my, mentors, divine feminine, support, without any other, without my other divine feminine mentor support in the space. And man, quite a learning experience overall. Really intense and beautiful way to cut one's teeth on facilitation. And yeah, I look back on that experience so fondly. And it really let me know right away. I think the biggest takeaway from that weekend of sessions was the power of these medicines, right? And the like, okay, you think you want to hold these containers? Well, here's a massive presentation for you right out the gates. How do you feel now? How was that for you? Um, is the sacred responsibility of someone's physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety. Yeah, you ready for that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, still to this day, I just remember all of it. I remember all of every part of it. It's so interesting. It was so impactful, and it's so important to then say, oh, this is the work I want to do. This is the work. It's like, are you ready for this? Are you ready for potential uh, aggression in this session? Are you ready for messiness, potentially medically threatening experiences, things that you just can't make up? You can't make this stuff up in your. It's just like you can't even expect. And we saw that, and it's just what a gift it was for me to watch you and how you handled that. It was just like I was in awe. I'm like, she must have been doing this for 20 years. That's what I felt, because it was so masterfully, uh, held this space in the way that you stayed calm and just watching. And wow, like that was a huge seed planted for me too, of like how this is how, if you're guiding people, having two facilitators, having a female facilitator, super important. And, there's just so much here. It's a very rich learnings. And God, we could talk about that for a long time, but I'll just say that even a year later, we met in your mentor's container for another journey, which was a very big one for me. And I had the biggest release of my life in that container. I cried for 20 minutes straight, and you were in that container. That's what I'm saying. This podcast is so, it's just, we've never even really unpacked it, really. I don't even think we talked a little bit about it in some integration session, but still, there, as I've learned more about myself and looking at those moments, I mean, after that session, the second one, which was about a year later, because I waited a whole nother year because I was like, I just want to take it slow after that first one. And right after that, I started this podcast. That blew me open to be like, my internal, whatever you want to call it, my internal intuition, my higher self was like, you have to start the podcast now. Are you ready? That was the message. Out of all the things I have experienced in these medicines, and voila, here we are 2 years later. You're on the podcast. The podcast is 90 something episodes. And and that's really important with the integration process, right? When you have these really clear messages about your patterning or what you really should look at to start to do and what you're avoiding or what is now, what is in the now, like how important is that in the integration process and what you've learned to listen and then march forward and how to do that?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I just want to reflect back like how cool it is that you've done this, that you've created this, from that listening and that knowing. I can remember, you had, I think your first book was out, I think at the time of that first
The
journey.
second.
Second book, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Um, and just like clearly you were building into something, and there was something that wanted to be birthed through you so much. And I remember you were kind of like working with that a little bit, like feeling into, yeah, just this offering that you wanted to bring to the world. And you've done it and you're continuing to do it, 90 some episodes. that's a big deal, in 2 years nonetheless. And so yeah, I just want to reflect back the bravery to listen and to follow and to do, because we all have brilliant ideas that cycle through, but how often does someone reach out and grab it and then do it? So just an honor to be here, in this thing that you've created from the work that you did alongside of the container that we set some years ago. So just really cool. um
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, but to your question, it's funny. It actually makes me think a lot about this past weekend, because I was in a medicine container, as a celebrant myself, sitting with ayahuasca for 3 nights. And some of us, not everybody, moves this way, but a lot of times, we humans can make a decision and we can march down a path that we create in our minds, and largely from hopefully our heart and our wants. um, but there's always things that we maybe hide from ourselves, right? For whatever reason. And in those expanded states of awareness of fullness of self, you get to be like, oh wow, look at that. That's something that maybe I haven't given enough thought to, time, consideration, that maybe that path is a path for me, and again, because our egos and just what we attach ourselves to, um, yeah, sometimes isn't the fullest picture. And so when we dissolve those protective mechanisms and we get to explore some new ideas for ourselves, can be extremely powerful. And then there's I always I'm careful with clients and also with myself and my own healing and expansion, that okay, well, I saw this and I don't necessarily have to do, right? Like, I just have to be aware that this is something to consider. And in this last journey for me, I'm 39 now, and largely my story and my mind and has been one of like, oh, I don't want children, right? Like, my purpose on this in this life is birthing other things, nurturing other things, self, my animals, friends, clients, but never children. Um, and I had a big reminder in the space that, like, actually, and it's not to say that fully, yes, that's what I want to do, but I need to give that more thought. And without the medicine and support of me being honest with me, I don't know that I would have come to that. And so, with the integration piece of that, I'm just holding that gently of like, well, nothing to do, but, in order to know that I gave such a big potential life milestone, the due respect that needs, to think about, right, and to explore, and whether that's a yes or a no, um, is undecided. But the integration is to continue in this reality of things, to get clear with oneself about what's important in this human experience for me, but for any individual who has these big, insights and things that cycle in, just to nurture them, without having to jump into that immediate action. I mean, sometimes maybe it's a big yes, then go right on, get in there. But just yeah, just listening and keep exploring and tuning in to, oh wow, I actually maybe have never thought about that because it's scary. That's a really scary thing. So maybe it's easier to just say, nope,
Mm.
I don't want to do that. Instead of being honest with myself and say, oh, well, maybe I do. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Um, but
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's wow. Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate the vulnerability of what you said in there. And I, yeah, it's so easy to go with our patterns and the way life has seemed to be and what we think we want and what we think we are, and then more is revealed, and it's like, oh my God, this is like a whole different pathway reality that I didn't even see or know or I might want. And how do I proceed forward with courage with whatever I choose? And I think I think that's really at the core of the integration process too, is what, here's what's coming up. I actually experienced this. This is what came up, whether it was for desire to have children or trauma or spiritual enlightenment or a job or career or your inner child, whatever it's coming up. It's like, how do you listen and be with that, honor yourself, but also you work with someone to talk about these things and to be able to then, because I had someone to work with as I decided these things and all the stuff that's still coming up today, I'm able to co-regulate with someone. I'm able to be with someone. And that's huge, to have the mirror without editing my story and my words, just being there as I come through that process. And then it's just another layer of me, another unfolding, another like, wow, another bit of joy, grief, happiness, pain, uh, you know, awe, wonder, whatever it is, and being with it instead of going, oh, there that is, I'll numb that out. Or there that is, I'll distract me here. Oh, there's that big thing coming, I'll put that off and procrastinate. And so, it's such a powerful, conversation. And I'm curious too with like what you're doing, because we had this discussion about, you spent over a decade as a respiratory therapist in an ICU and ER settings, and you've seen a lot, in holding space in medicine journeys to prepare you for what you're now called to do, which is this training, which is a medical and somatic response training. And when you told me about it and then showed me it and I got to see, and I was like, wow, like this is what this space needs, because if you're in the space, you're going to see. And it's been 5 years for me. I have seen presentations. I have heard of people having seizures, and I've seen people have really challenging experiences physically, and never mind mentally and emotionally. So, the training that you've created and co-created, there's another person you've co-created with, the like, I'm curious with this training, which I think is called the Prepared Guide. And is that right?
Yeah, we're kind of, when we started this, we weren't really sure what if it was going to come out of infancy into anything else, so we just kind of called it, medical and somatic response training. And then now that we're moving forward because of the need and because of how it was received with the first cohort, we've done, kind of building it around the prepared guide. And hopefully, maybe other trainings will come through this as well, but yeah, kind of the blanket name is the prepared guide. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this training, there's many things that I think that are opportunities that are really important in the space to help people in crisis responses and things that happen in medicine experiences on ayahuasca, ketamine, 5-MeO DMT. I mean, these happen, MDMA assisted therapy, others. And I just love to hear from you about why this training is so important right now. And like, what risks do you see with guides that don't have this training?
Yeah. Yeah, why is it important right now? I think to answer that first is because of the prevalence of these containers now. Psychedelic assisted therapies have been happening for a long time, but on a much smaller scale. And now it's just erupted, and it's still comparatively, it's still a small percentage of people that are reaching out to these therapeutic modalities, but it's becoming more and more and more. And, a lot of people who hold these containers are well trained. Some maybe not so much, but largely there's a lot of people out there with a lot of good background, but not a lot of good medical background. A lot of the guides' backgrounds are therapist or psychiatrist or underground practitioners of various backgrounds, breath workers, yoga, psycho-spiritual backgrounds. But a lot of people have never been in the presence of a true medical emergency. And anytime we give somebody a medicine, even with really good, proper preparation and screening, stuff can happen. And those things are starting to come up in groups of facilitators that I am a part of, where people are holding ceremony and something happened, and I will say too, the reason this training was born is because of my co-creator Lena. So she is a beautiful medicine woman in California, and she had a client who was not completely forthcoming around some withdrawal symptoms with alcohol. Was served a medicine and had about a 10-minute seizure experience. And Lena is a solo practitioner. She works alone. And, after that happened, it was so clear to her. And she had already in her mind, before that had even happened, wanted more medical training. And then that happened. And it just cemented, made clear as day, I need more medical training, and how to move through that. Client was just fine and okay, and everything. Nothing. No life ending or life challenges there. She was just fine. I'll speak for myself too. I had a client who was also a friend, who had a type of epilepsy that you get when you start your period as a young woman. It's like an estrogen based seizure disorder. It was genetic. Her mom had it, and she wanted to work with a heart opening medicine. And she also had other experiences with bigger entheogens as well. But, I ran it up all the appropriate, lines of support to make sure she would be safe for a journey. And largely it was, yeah, she'll be just fine. Do this, do that, do this. And so because of my medical background and knowing that she could have a breakthrough seizure, we also talked about that on the front end. Like, if you seize, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how long I'm going to do it. And if it continues for X amount of time, then I'm going to call for more medical support. So we did the journey. She did a primary dose, secondary dose, did excellent. I prepared prasad. We sat down to do prasad. I was turning around to go get something from downstairs, and she had a seizure. Me and my co-facilitator did exactly as we had talked about, as we had planned. We supported her. It was like maybe 30-second seizure. It was pretty short, but grandma, and she was very post-ictal after the experience, and so we were with her for another 2 hours or so, just as she reoriented and got grounded and stabilized and got to a good enough place that I could take her home. But all that to say is, even when you are prepared, when you know the background, when you have a plan, things happen. They can, even if your client doesn't have a background. I know another facilitator who served a gentleman, and he aspirated a little bit, and he held his breath. And then he turned blue, and then he had a seizure, and they had to call for EMS. They came, took him. He was just fine too. But these things are happening, I guess, is my point. And I think largely people aren't always talking about it because I think the ego wants to protect, like, oh, it's something I did as the facilitator. That was wrong. But it's not. Nobody did anything wrong. It's just something that happened. So creating this training, and why it's important now is to give somebody a more more knowledge base, more education as they hold their containers, so that hopefully no one ever experiences that. But if they do, they will know how to support not only the client but themselves through it, and to keep people really, really safe.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for giving those powerful examples of what can happen and what does happen in the space. And I hope for anyone listening, they can go back and listen to that again. Like, this is what is happening. And if I'm going to send a client of mine or my mother into a psychedelic assisted therapy setting, you bet that I'm going to vet, and I'm going to do my research, and I'm going to see what the training is for these facilitators or retreat centers to see, is this going to be appropriate? Knowing the medical histories, the contraindications, all of it, to be the sexual histories, whatever is relevant, and especially, female therapists, facilitators working with females, and different things that are often not happening in the space, which could be okay for some. But I think there's so much nuance, and there's so much to this that, to be really educated and to understand how much and how important this isn't just going and meeting God, or going and, maybe you can, maybe that does happen, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it shows you another message, or maybe you have a seizure, or maybe something. It's not to scare, it's just to be aware, like, this is the reality. This happens in hospital settings when people are administered medications and things are happening right in real time. So, one other thing I appreciate about, this training, what you're doing, is that you've run the first cohort. It was really successful. You had a lot of good feedback. You're running another one, which we can talk about coming up here soon. But it's not just about the medical preparedness. It's about the facilitator's nervous system too, right?
Yeah.
And maybe we talk into that a little bit, like the nervous system of the facilitator, how important that is in situations where nothing happens, and also if something does happen. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm in my second year of Peter Levine's training to be a somatic experiencing practitioner. And when Lena asked me to create this medical training with my background, I said yes. And then I started thinking about it, and I said, the other thing that seems really important is to pull in the somatic aspect of this too. And, as we all know, co-regulation is a real thing. And so whether there's an emergency happening in our space, how our nervous system is in alignment as we step into holding space for another is really important. So, and knowing those things about ourselves, being curious, what is my my automatic survival responses? How have those adapted through my life, whether it was through dysfunctional family dynamics at home that caused me to be a fighter, or maybe I dissociate, all those things. Knowing that about how our system runs is really important, so that we can hold our containers safely, and know ourselves on that level too. It's one thing to know yourself emotionally, spiritually, cognitively. But what about my nervous system? What is that speaking? And it's really, really important. And as someone who has a more anxious based system, I've really gotten to cultivate my relationship with that, and not override. I was such an overrider. Like, I might be feeling super anxious inside, but I would present super calmly. I recently had a client who gave me a duck analogy, like calm on the surface, paddling like hell under the water. And I just loved that because I can remember how that felt, right? And so it's been an unlearning of like safely doing that for myself. So I'm not paddling like hell underneath, and that I am what's on the surface is how I feel, which is a lot of work. So we do. In the training, introduce people to even thinking about their nervous system as it is without a stressful event. Just, day to day, how do you feel? What does activation feel like? Do you experience dissociation? All those things, and kind of letting them explore what's my system like? And then introducing the question, if you have an emergency in your space, what would be your assumption about how your system might respond? Because it isn't a cognitive experience. Your nervous system picks a survival strategy. And if you have a client who you've served a medicine to who's now in a medical or even psychospiritual emergency, um, what might that be like for you? And so to um, really explore that, and then to talk about, the way that I kind of saw it as I was building the curriculum is there's probably going to be a couple ways. You're either going to go into a free state, or you're going to go into kind of a chaos state of flight. Like you might not run out of the container, or you might, but hopefully not. But maybe. But you might be chaotic in your space. You might be trying to help your client, but you're so activated that you're not actually doing anything. And you're wasting valuable minutes of time that could be saving a life. And so we work with that charge, and we give real tools for orienting and for relaxing the nervous system in the time of emergency for the facilitator, so they can actually be of service to the client. And if you're stuck, if you're really, really stuck, and you or your co-facilitator cannot get to it, then call 911. That's the answer. If you can't go into a supportive role, you got to call somebody who will. And so really training people to do that is largely what we try to tie in. And then also how to let that go. I will try to keep this brief, but one of the things that I wish could have been different as a medical provider. Nobody ever debriefed with us, ever. I would walk into a patient's room. I would maybe disconnect life support, and somebody would pass away, and I would have to then turn around and go into the next room and give a breathing treatment. Like nothing happened over there. That wasn't a really devastating, sad thing that I witnessed. It was so much stuffing, and that over time, that really jacked my nervous system up a lot. And I've been uncoupling all of that for some time now, and finding places where I still have that happening in my system. And so helping the facilitator and the client debrief after an emergency too, so that they're not carrying that forward, so that they're getting the support that they need to let that go, so they don't carry that into another client's container, so they can repair if there needs to be repair with the client, if some, that had the medical experience, but just so everybody has really well-rounded support for their mind, body, soul, and nervous system.
Yeah. Wow. I want to sit with that one for a moment. Yeah. It's just, yeah, I'm just so grateful for this conversation and all of your life experiences that were leading you to this moment to bring this out for people and others. And I truly understand the importance of it from what I've experienced personally, being destabilized after a medicine experience for almost 6 months, and then seeing other people have these different challenges that you just don't hear about. You don't hear about it in the space much at all. You just don't hear about it. It's just And I think it's to protect the place, to protect the facilitator, to protect the income stream coming in. And I understand it. And it's, it's risky, the legalities and the things that people are facing. It makes sense, but it's also can't be overlooked. Mm-hmm. And we really need to take a hard look at that and see, okay, what is my nervous system going to do when the crisis happens? Do you know that? And then what can I do? And then what can I do afterwards to debrief? Like, you didn't have that. And now you've created that community to be able to debrief and be able to co-regulate, to be able to talk about this medical emergency or anything that happened. Maybe it was a beautiful experience, but it triggered some part of a trauma pattern in yourself that you went, oh, I haven't looked at that in myself during the journey with the participant. These are things too you want to be able to debrief and co-regulate and work on. And if you don't, then you're bypassing and putting shadow into a container that you haven't actually looked at yourself. And I think that's can be really common too. And it's the same in the therapeutic world. I mean, in therapy, I'm a therapist by training. I mean, this is what happens, wounded healers become therapists, and then clients will talk about situations that trigger the therapist. And then next thing you know, if you're not working on that with your mentor, your guide, another person, you're just carrying that into the containers every time you get triggered. And that's your responsibility. That's due diligence. That's something that you really, really want to look at and talk about and work through yourself to have integrity. And so no one's perfect, right? I mean, I still get triggered at times. I have a nervous system that absolutely goes towards the anxious, which is why I've done all this work on my nervous system, and I brought in psychedelic assisted therapies and incredible facilitator guides like Jo at times. And I think, another question I have is like we could talk about, we'll have to bring you back on. There's so much, but I think the other part is the spiritual crises that can happen and the spiritual emergencies. So can you talk about that, recognizing the spiritual emergencies?
Absolutely. And, Lena really, this is her baby. She really brings us in with all her background. And, the module 3, which was our medical crisis and also psychospiritual emergency, was so big that we actually ended up breaking it into 2 sessions because we made it just a really long day, but it was so content heavy and so important that we decided this next go around to separate them, to just do the medical and then do the psychological kind of crises and how to support that. And she really brings in this beautiful like a kaleidoscope of not only trauma informed care and psychological Western approaches to it, but also the bigger karmic pieces of what happens when we do dissolve an ego and it fractures or fragments or is dysregulated or activated in a state of overwhelm. How do we decipher, how do we hold that, and the different levels of that, like what is okay to just be in support with as the facilitator? When does it step into, okay, actually this is a medical psycho-spiritual crisis that needs some intervention from, a psychiatrist or from, somebody along those lines, and how to best hold that. And talk about nervous system too as the facilitator. You've given someone a powerful medicine, and now there's some destabilization. That feels, if you let yourself feel that as the practitioner, that is concerning and scary. Because the whole point of holding these containers is to help. And so when you look at someone in a state of crisis psychologically, and you're like, wow, did I cause harm? how to hold that safely while that unfolding is unfolding, because it is. And with good support, whether from you or also a team of professionals to support somebody in that process of awakening or um, you know reforming. um, uh, it might be the therapeutic healing thing that they needed, and it might look really intense and it might look really scary. So, how to create a safe container for them, for yourself, and also to have protocol about when to advance care. So, she just does a great job of really giving all of the considerations and what kind of each piece of that could look like, and then how to um, support that. And that's a big piece. I mean, these medicines, even MDMA. I've seen destabilization after an MDMA journey. And people act like it's kind of like, oh, not such a big medicine. If the nervous system in front of you takes that medicine and it pushes through something that it wasn't really maybe ready to push through, and now they're destabilized, how do you hold that? So, yeah, we just really try to bring that awareness into this training too, so people don't work outside of their scopes to support that.
Yeah, so important. So important to know the client, know what you're getting into, and know if it's beyond your scope of practice and care. And it's not just about, oh, well, it's about the medicine. The medicine will guide them. The spirit of the medicine will guide them. But yeah, partly, but that's only a part of the puzzle that, these individuals, these nervous systems, these souls have an experience, especially in group settings. And maybe there's very little integration. And what ends up happening, they fall into my arena, they fall into my friends' arenas that are helping people to get stable again, to go into this content that is buried deep that you maybe didn't even know your defense mechanisms blanked it out so you could live day to day. But then the medicines reveal, here's what happened 4 years ago, here's what happened 7 years ago, here's what happened when you were a child. And that content could spark a whole big unfolding process. And that happened to me. It's still happening. And so I reflected that in some of my podcast episodes about the journey of healing father wound. And just, I thought I had dealt with that, and not even close. It has just come up in new ways and new layers. And so, and I now remember that destabilizing experience I had, you actually you knew about that experience. And I never got to really talk to you much in detail about it because I had my own, at the time I had my integration people that I was working with, but you actually saw that container. And you probably didn't know what happened because I didn't get to express it to you specifically, but I'm saying it took 6 months for me to come back from that. That was a spiritual emergency I had. I had a spiritual emergency that emerged from that really was challenging, to say the least. I kept waking up at 2 and 3 in the morning with reactivations, and it was with 5-MeO DMT. And
I think we spoke.
And it continued for months. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah. I think you and I had spoke on the phone after that. I think
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Initially, because you were like, I'm trying to make sense of this. And I had luckily had, luckily, we'll say luckily, an experience not the same, but similarly, like, whoa, my experiences with that medicine up until this time had been this. And then I had this. And what do I do?
Oh, that's right.
What do I do with this? What do I do with that? And to your point, yeah, it can be very, very awakening and also dysregulating and destabilizing as well. And yeah, I didn't know that it got to that point where you would, dub it a spiritual emergency. So the integration that you did around that, what was the most? Was it just time? Was there certain things that helped you really land that experience?
Yeah, it was a really busy time in my life. It's a lot happening. So for me to really go into what exactly happened and why this is such a big crisis that's keeping me in a fearful state. And it took a while to unpack it. And then once I started to unpack it, I realized that if I wanted to fix it, let's say, heal it, repair it, I needed to face it head on, right back again with the medicine in a safe container. And I waited 6 months. And then 6 months later, I finally was in that container, and I let myself have the corrective experience, and it completely, in one sitting, vanished within 20 minutes after holding it for 6 months. And so, and it was gone. Like it was out of where stuff gets embedded in the nervous system and in the brain, it had been dissolved. And so I didn't have to carry it or think about it. It was just, okay. And so it is. And so, and I sat with really skilled facilitators administering that medicine. It was in Mexico. And yeah, and it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot again in my own work as a psychedelic concierge and being trained in medicine and learning. And there's just constant learnings. And I think our own experiences are very important too, how we integrate with integrity with what we do if we're going to tell clients to do the same. And so it's just so important. And, so I'm so grateful that, like I said, I'm so grateful we met. And then also the now what you're doing in this training. So, like I said, we could talk for hours. So I think if we can talk about, I could go into your last ayahuasca experience for probably another 20 minutes, but I want to go into more about this training and tell us about this, like, training, the emergency kit you provide. I think it's like 7 live modules for people so that I can understand, the audience can understand, and then tell us about that and when the next training is going to happen.
Yeah. So we start kind of basic. I've never built curriculum, right? So this was a huge birthing process for me, though it didn't culminate in a child. It culminated in this training. It felt like a very similar process, but we start with the basics. Module 1 is all about screening your intake. What you need to be asking medically, what you need to be asking psychologically, red flags, why it's a red flag, but just a deeper dive. And also, a lot of the facilitator trainings do cover these things. But oftentimes when you're in a training, you're just going through, so this is kind of like a revisiting, a deepening into why this is so important. And, I want to say no judgment, but it's not completely true. If you're not screening and you're providing people with psychedelic experiences, please rethink that greatly. I beg you. So we talk about why it's important, and then we also talk about creating a medical, a safety and emergency preparedness plan. This came to me from working in the ICUs and in the hospital. It's like, the reason things would go smoothly when when a code would happen or something like that is because we had it outlined. We knew where the supplies were. We knew who was doing what. There was a plan. So we talk about how to, for each person in the cohort, to create an emergency preparedness plan for their practice, whether they're a solo practitioner or they work with others, how to create safety in their space already, and then what to have in their spaces. Module 2 is, as we talked about, the facilitator's nervous system, really, really deep diving into how our system shows up and what might our system do if I've provided someone with a psychedelic medicine that may or may not be legal, depending on where I'm at. And now they're having a medical emergency. What kind of impact is that going to have? And how do I work with that? And give them real tools for regulating and orienting and coming back to their bodies in the moment so that they can be of service. Module 3 is, like I said, a very probably the biggest content wise. And we go through everything from, fainting, lightheadedness to different allergic reactions, all the way to anaphylaxis, seizures, aspiration, cardiopulmonary arrest, stroke, different kinds of stroke. We talk about all of that. And we talk about the signs and symptoms, how to monitor when it turns into a real deal emergency, how to keep somebody supported until you get EMS there. And so we even share protocols on kind of step by step what to do for each one. And then the second part of that is the psychospiritual crisis and how to tend to that for people if there is destabilization or psychosis or stuff like that in the space, and how to be of service to your client. Module 4 is the post-crisis integration. So that is, we talk about integration all of the time and its importance in this space, right? Like it's equal parts as important as the medicine journeys themselves. Well, my learning in the medical world was why it was, because it was missed in my world as an RT, and for anybody at the bedside, the impacts that had on me, which were really not good, and the coping mechanisms that I made, which were also not good. The debriefing and the integration is equally important after you have a crisis in your space. So, how to support the client in that, how to support your own system. Again, real life tools to do that. Yeah, to let things land, to then clear it from your system, and to kind of reorient after that. And then also get support if you still need more support as a facilitator. Just holistic support for yourself and for your client and for your team. If you work with multiple facilitators, like get the team together, talk about what happened, and kind of the timelines to do that in that are the most supportive, and then how to, again, not shame. It's nothing that anybody did wrong, but how can we learn and grow from this for next time for even better response? And then module 5 is the protocols. We kind of go deeper into those, when to intervene, when to just hold, what is an energetic release versus what is a medical emergency, how to call 911. And I know that sounds kind of silly, like 911, you just call them, but what to say when you call so that you get the right people to you and not end up with the wrong folks showing up to your temple or ceremonial or therapeutic space. If you just need medical support, how to ask for that directly, then how to talk to the EMTs when they arrive, what to share, how to protect your clients' confidentiality, conversations to have on the front end of journeys about those things. We also did pull in another really seasoned practitioner and mentor in our world to talk about the legal aspects of things and how to know your rights as the facilitator, and how to protect your practice. And and then module 6 is, I'm glad we talked about this a little bit, but we talk about the emergency kit and we go through each thing, what they do, why it's important, uh, different considerations depending on where you are locationally. Like I'm out I'm an hour from any hospital here. And so what do I need that maybe somebody who's in an inner city doesn't, so to talk about those things. But lastly, what we tied in at the end, and I think just to make the training just really overall robust, was to consider your shadow as the facilitator, because to your point, if we don't tend to these things, we carry it in with us, even unconsciously. And so we talk about shadow a little bit too in this, and also how that shadow could yeah, might keep you from calling for help when you need to call for help, or other ways in which the shadow might get in the way of a medical emergency or a psychospiritual emergency, and how to know yourself even better on that front. And we do a lot of breakout groups so people can practice the skills. And work with one another as colleagues, because again, Lena and I really know um, everybody who showed up for the last cohort were super seasoned, skilled guides, practitioners, therapists, and everybody has their own wisdom. So we really want to highlight that in the space, to just keep building on that as a collective, and a collective wisdom. So that's kind of the how the flow of the training looks, and it's 4 weeks, 7 times we come together for about 3 hours each time. This time we're going to run it on the evenings, on a Tuesday and Thursday in the evening, just to make it a little more available. We did weekend last time, and I think that's hard for people in our space, and people like their weekends too. And the next one will start February 12th of 2026 and run through March 5th of 2026. And yeah, so we're really excited and really hoping to just keep growing this so people can not only feel more safe as the facilitator, because that was kind of a lot of the reflection we got of like, I'm super trained psychologically or in this modality or that, and I feel really comfortable serving medicine. But I have this like low hum in the background of like, oh, if I had a medical emergency, I don't really know what to do. And like, they
Mm.
say, go get your CPR, which is yes, go get your CPR. Absolutely. But again, if you don't have practice hands on in emergency settings, when that moment comes to use it, are you going to be able to access it? Are you even going to be able to pull, like, oh, is your nervous system going to be in such a state that you can't even remember what the compression to breath ratio is? Maybe. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm really grateful you were so thorough with that and explaining each part of it, because I think, there's a lot of discussions that we've had today on the episode that I feel are I've never had actually, which I'm really excited about, going into depth of how important this is, and for people to be able to really sit and listen to what you said and really sit with this conversation today, which I think is essential. Maybe one of the most essential conversations I've had on entrepreneurs in recovery. And I'm I'm just so excited for what you're doing, and I'm excited for as this unfolds and us coming together, doing another show, and as this training becomes just what I think it will be in the space, what it already is on the first cohort, but what it could potentially be, and adding this to curriculums, and as the landscape of the legality of psychedelics unfolds, and how important this is to add into curriculums. And so I'm just so excited for you, Jo. Really grateful we had this discussion today.
You. It's a wild thing to be here. I never thought that all of these things would um, come thread and weave themselves together in a way to become something like this offering. And I'm, you know, curious and excited to see what it wants to become. And I just feel grateful for all the different paths that have led me here, and super grateful to Lena for her vision on this, and the invitation to create. This is an edge for me to do all of these things, and with the love and support of one another and the different skill sets we both have, we've created this thing. So I'm excited to see where it wants to continue to go. And I'm extremely grateful to you for your time and to come together and to just be a part of this thing that was, planted as a seed back in a different container together. And now to be a guest on your show, it just feels really, really, I don't know, beautiful. And I'm just really grateful for your time, Jesse.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a full circle moment here.
Definitely.
And I was honored to receive you today. And I'm excited for the audience to listen and get to know you better, and just this whole experience today, because people are going to get to know me better too. I got to be vulnerable about some of these containers you've been in, and really big ones, significant. And So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I just hope you have a really great day. And thanks for coming on the show again.
Yeah, thank you. And I did want to add one more thing to
Yeah.
for your folks who listen to the podcast. If they do have interest in signing up for the training, we wanted to offer them a discount for the training. So just using the code prepared
Mm.
15 at checkout at thepreparedguide.org, if that's something that they want to do, just to kind of give back to your listeners, save a little bit of money, and be a part of the training for the next one. And if people have questions, and they're like, I'm not quite sure, but it sounds really interesting, they can also contact us through the website too to do like a discovery call to see if this training is right for them.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. And we'll definitely link that in the show notes. We'll put in the 15% code, promo code prepared 15. We'll put that in the show notes for sure. Yeah. Thepreparedguide.com. Thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, and if anyone has any questions, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, just either, I think the best way, my personal site is yogaofsacredmedicine.com. That'll link you
Okay.
to my email. And the preparedguide.org, that will also have some contact us material in there too. So people can follow those links to get in touch with us there.
Perfect. All
Awesome.
right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, just thanks again for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm excited to connect again soon in the new year.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.